He would go first. I understand why people, find this to be a very difficult issue, but with all due respect, I would like to move item 10, and I'll tell you why. I think we should take the vote today. I think that, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming. This isn't the first hearing. I've seen all of you at several hearings. We've been engaged in this for almost a year, and I know that, having talked to the county staff, I know they've received probably 1,000 phone calls. So there's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of feedback. I've read all the emails I've gotten many from both sides of this debate, not only from organizations, but from a lot of individuals who are very passionate on this issue. So I think we've received a lot of feedback. So I want to thank everyone for doing that, for staying until this late hour. I also want to add my appreciation, I don't know who said it, but applaud those of you who've come through successfully through the struggles that you've had. I know it's not easy. I know quite, I've had mental illness in not my immediate family, but I'm pretty well familiar with the mental health system, not necessarily here in California. I don't see this as having been a divisive thing, personally. I see this as having been a good thing for a couple of reasons. One is that this board has gotten a great education. We don't always get to focus on the same issues because we all have different areas, transportation, land use, blah, blah, blah. So it's very unusual, besides the health committee, that we would spend this amount of time on a health issue that impacts so many people and is so critical to their lives. So I think that's a good thing. I always think that's a good thing. We probably learn more today, than we have in a very long time. So I think that's good. And I think it's clear from the vote on the 9, and I kind of see them as a package, but that we all understand, everyone in this room understands the need to improve the system, no matter which side of this thing you're on. And so I don't necessarily think it was bad. I think there are differences of opinion, just like there are differences of opinion on a lot of different things. And the role, I think, of the leadership is to finally take a vote on it, having heard from people. I think the whole package with the 10 fit a wide spectrum of needs that have been talked about today. Not everybody needs this, and not everyone can do the voluntary thing either. It's a very wide range. We've heard a lot of different stories from people. So I'd like to move it. I support it mainly because I think, given all of this, there are families that really need it. And as a democratic society, people talk about democracy. I think it's unfair to deny the right of those people, we're only doing 5, to those 5 families, those 5 people who want this. I feel just as an act of fairness under democracy that we should grant that to them. And on top of that, I think that the 5150 rate in the county, when this came out in the health committee, I was shocked. We do 30 a day. We do 30 a day. My staff figured it out. It's every 48 minutes. We're hauling someone to forcibly. And under 5150, people still have constitutional rights, but not nearly what they have under Laura's law. There's a lot of protections in Laura's law. And it's unfortunate that either one of these things have to happen. But I certainly feel that I would much prefer to have these 5 people have this choice to have the Laura's law proposal or the 1421 proposal than to become part of that group of 30 every single day. 900 every single month in Alameda County that are forced and many times sedated and as Alex said, driven with restraints on their arms and their legs. I think that is the ultimate issue of force. And in terms of, I think it was also very interesting, I hadn't totally heard the Nevada thing, but to understand that the very act of having the referral actually gets, and then he said in the vast majority of cases, had those clients actually agree to the treatment. So it's not so much a really want, it's just that incentive, and the fact that the stats he gave us said that, and I asked him, the act of the referral triggered the willingness of that client to get treatment. So I think that's really a positive thing. And in terms of cost, we're spending all this money on this other thing. I see it as a package. I think people talk about cost savings. The cost of one ambulance ride is, I don't know how much, but it's a lot. The cost of a day in John George is a lot. So the reason why the costs are unsure is not because these guys aren't doing their job. I think the reason the cost is unsure, my understanding is they have to negotiate this with the court. We're not, that conversation has to take place. I totally respect Supervisor Byer or anyone else who want to have a hearing. There's going to be a couple months. I would suggest we do it as fast as possible, you know, so that we don't delay it too much more. But if you want to have a hearing, other people want to have more dialogue over the next couple months, I'm fine with that. I would never stop that. But I'd like to move the item.
I'll second that, and Kroger, I'd like to speak.
Supervisor Henry.
Now I find myself speaking to a motion, which is unfortunate. First of all, I have a list of questions, but I think based on the time and what I've heard, I'm going to forego running through the 20-something questions. I just want to say, first of all, that I'm really torn, and probably ultimately when I get home tonight I will get in trouble. But I really want to thank everybody who's been here. I think this hearing today kind of restored my faith in democracy. There was no name calling, there was passion, there was people talking about personal experiences, and personally I believe that's what democracy should be. But as I listened, I've heard a couple things that made me rethink my position. What keeps running through my mind is, what if we get it wrong? I keep thinking that, what if we get it wrong? What happens? And then a speaker said, if we're going to help someone, we must first do no harm. That resonated with me. I think, all of us walk around the streets on a daily basis. And I walk through my community in Fremont. This is not an urban thing, it's not a suburban thing, it's amongst us every day. And you see people that are homeless with mental health issues, and you want to help them. But what's running through my mind now, after listening to the speakers, is Laura's Law might get you there. Might. But I just keep thinking, can't we be more compassionate here in Alameda County? Do we really have to jump to something like Laura's Law? I mean, my cousin, who can't spell his name right, said the first thing they ask is, do you need housing? Are you hungry? I heard him say that. Why can't we start there? And so I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I have to be honest with you, I am totally where President Carson is at. And he should have called on me first, because he would have gotten a second to his motion, but he didn't. I mean that with a joke there, Mr. President. But I think we could send our staff back, who I believe are some of the most brilliant people in county government, and our health director involved in that. Just awesome people, caring people. And I could say to them, design me a program that helps people. I hate to say it like this because I've never been in this position. I don't know if they realize they need help or if they don't. I don't know. It's abstain.
I don't abstain, sir. I make decisions. But I think if I asked our staff to develop a program that helps get services to people who don't realize that they need them, I think you could come back with something a bit more compassionate. I really do. And so I'm not going to support the motion, even though I talked about this with my wife last night.
extensively. And when I get home tonight, she's already texted me once and said, "How did you vote?" I'm gonna get in trouble. But I really believe, Alex, we can do better here. And I wish we would have given the president's motion a little bit more thought. And can we achieve the same goal? And can we be the model? Not Nevada County, that's why I asked the question about, you're pretty conservative there, how big is your county? I can't compare myself to them. They're not us. And we're not New York. So, I can't support the motion as it's put before us. And I wish we would have listened to the president. And I've listened to everything you said, sir, and my heart goes out to you. And I want to help you find services for these people, but I'm just not sure it's the right thing, the right way to go about it right now.
Supervisor Zayed.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say, from the very beginning, I jumped right out there and said, we're not voting on a particular program today. We are simply going to say, are we going to, you're going to come back and show us what you're going to flesh out, and you're going to give us something to vote on. Because this evening, there, in my mind, I don't know if we're going to compel medication. We've said we're not going to. We're going to have treatment plans, I'm assuming. But I want to be real clear, Alex. If I had received a 7-page document that showed the nuts and bolts of how the program is going to work, it would be much easier for me to say, this is something that I can wrap my arms around, and you know what? I'd like to take it back to my constituents in District 2 and run the details of the program at a public hearing. That makes it easier. But when I hear Nevada's example, and then I hear San Francisco's example, and there were a couple of more examples. One of them was, which I liked, the respite center. And we haven't chosen any particular model, but we're looking at going in a certain direction. I don't have anything specific that I'm actually going to vote on, and hence the confusion. Because as the speakers were coming up to speak, we know that several of them misinterpreted Laura's law. It was blatant. Forced medication, forced incarceration. But the perception for a lot of people is the truth. And so getting to the truth means trust. So I really, the reason I wanted to go out and have my town hall meeting on the issue was to get into discourse and dialogue with people to talk about how do we build trust that what Alameda County is going to be doing is sound, solid, and all of the people that have a vested interest in this have come together and have agreed that this is the model that we're going to use for us. And what threw me for a loop was, again, in the staff report, where we're looking at the amount of money. I, like everybody else, a human life. There's no price on human life. But when the report is not precise about the dollars, again, the information is not comprehensive. So it's difficult, again, to proceed without any specificity and any real sense of what it's going to be. So it's confusing to me, as it is to a lot of people in the public. I'm in favor of dialogue. I like the president's facilitated process with all the stakeholders. Quite honestly, that appeals to me. because it incorporates everything that I want to do. I sincerely believe that with people doing the hard work, talking about the issues, coming together in the same room, the outcome will be we're going to have a Lord's Law. But it's going to be different than everybody else's because this is Alameda County. It's going to incorporate culture, sensitivity. It's going to incorporate gender sensitivity, age, youth, seniors. It's going to incorporate people who are quadriplegic, people who have disabilities, physical disabilities, speech disabilities, all of those other things that you have to allow. Also, it's going to incorporate income. Are we only going to take people who have health insurance? Because the health insurance will cover the cost. Or can we get people who are in general assistance? So what's the whole gamut of the reach of the program? Again, no details, no specificity. So it's really, really difficult. And as much as I support Supervisor Chan's hard work, and I want to go forward with Laura's Law, there's nothing for me to vote on that says this model works. And everybody here in the room, both sides, because there are two sides, it's clear because one side on that side of the room, one side on that side of the room, gee, we've divided ourselves when we walked in the door. We divided ourselves. And we did it because that's a choice that we made. So the responsibility of the supervisors is to bring people together. I would really prefer that the room would be mixed and everybody across the board would say, this is something I can believe in. Now, it may be difficult for you to get your arms around, but I'm not an idealist. I'm a dreamer. And there was a man that said, people who dream are people who are willing to fight and put in the hard work. I'm willing to do that. And I'm willing to take it out to my constituents and say, look, I need to hear all sides, but eventually we need to come together and achieve some consensus. That's what got me here. That's what got me here. Multicultural, multi-spirited, diverse, idealist. Yeah, I'm there. That's the way I think, okay? And so, that's where I'm at. So I'm really torn, so I'm going to have to wait for the supervisor to my left to tell us what he thinks.
If I can, yeah. Luke, go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I've sat through more than 6 hours of this today. I've asked a few things, made a few comments, but for the most part, I've been quiet. My staff has been talking to me about this for the last few months. I've reviewed the material. I found today very informative, and I appreciate everybody who's come down here representing their perspective. You know, from the way I look at this, our staff has come forth with a recommendation, a set of recommendations focused on a voluntary program and assisted outpatient treatment pilot to meet the needs of clients, consumers that are not engaged in services or are resistant to treatment, and their family members. This includes individuals that fall through the cracks of the system and may be in and out of psychiatric emergency rooms or the county jail or off the 5150s. You know, I have no, if I had any hesitation about making a decision, I would say that, but I don't have any hesitation because I've heard enough. The Mental Health Advisory Board Commission, Steve mentioned, voted on this unanimously. Our staff has reluctantly come forward with this recommendation after a lot of internal discussion. The House is divided, so as an elected official, I've got to make a call. And my job is to balance the equities and do what I think is in the best interest of society, of our community, of all of us, and not just one side or the other. And when I look at this, we're talking about people not being victims or being perpetrators of crime. We're talking about trying to handle folks in a humanitarian sense. I think the 9 recommendations that have been laid out initially do all the services and do everything that everyone's asking for. So I don't see any compulsion around why we need to hesitate on enacting the 10th recommendation, because once again, it's a pilot for only 5 individuals. Quite frankly, if there's hesitation of the Board of Supervisors about implementing the pilot, you can implement the pilot in District 4. I represent a portion of Oakland, most unincorporated area in Pleasant. Implement it in my district. Let me be the guinea pig for the 5. I'll gladly take it. I am not a fan of the drug companies. If I were a fan of the drug companies and I was looking at this just on that side, then I'd vote against it. But once again, it's my job to balance the equities and look at what's good for the entire society and not what's good for one individual. So by not moving ahead with this pilot program, what we're saying is we are afraid to consider this as an option. And I'm not afraid to consider this as an option, because if the option doesn't work, then we can say it doesn't work, we're not going to do it anymore. Or we can say it's worked this way and it needs to be tweaked that way. We can take lessons learned. So I'm not afraid to move ahead with that. I think the consequences of not doing stuff is that we continue to delay. And as we continue to delay, other people might continue to suffer as a result of that. I respect everyone who's on the side of the issue. I don't have any experiences with mental health, but as someone who's coming from this from a neutral perspective, I've heard everybody, and I'm ready to do what I think is right. The folks who are who have to experience this will receive due process. They will receive due process. And once again, some of the comments I've heard are just so ludicrous, it's mind-boggling. But the point of the matter is, my job is to balance the equities. I'm prepared to balance the equities on the side of what I think is good for the entire, for all of us, not just good for one side or the other. What I think is good for all of us. And once again, we're talking about 5 people that ultimately, after the staff has done all of their provided everything they can do, and we still have 5 individuals that we want to try this approach on that meet the qualifications, that will be considered. And then they're going to come back with a detailed design of a program. That's not what's before us today. They're going to come back with that. But in order to come back with that, they've got to get authorization to go do that. And so if we don't give them authorization, then they're not going to do it. Case closed, end of ball game. So that's what we're talking about. So if folks need more time, I know where I stand on it based on everything I've heard, the totality of it over today, from my staff, over the last number of months, etc. Today has just reaffirmed what I thought my position was going to be. So I thank everyone for coming out today. I'm sorry I can't weigh in and support you, because once again, I'm not looking to just support you. I'm looking at what's good for everybody. I'm done.
So you're looking to support 5?
So what I had asked for before we take the vote on that, what I had asked for was that we would be given 3 months. Not that we would not take an ultimate action, but we would be given 3 months to have a comprehensive review of programs that could serve the population that's being targeted under the AB 1421 pilot, that would include having San Francisco model, work being done in other places, including what was mentioned today. And then we reviewed those programs being done by key stakeholders and judges and public defenders and county council and consumers and family members and patient rights advocates in the healthcare system. I didn't ask that we not take an action at all. I asked that we be given a little bit more time. So I respect the fact that some people come to their conclusions much quicker than others. I think that this is an extremely, extremely important issue for us to be able to exercise every opportunity for people who have to make the ultimate decision to feel that they're comfortable with that decision. I respect the fact that there's been a year of hearings around this. I think I've sat at most of those hearings. I respect the fact that a lot of people over the last several months have invested some time in this because of the fact that that's what a part of our job is. I've been personally invested over 35 years in it because of the fact that I have an immediate family member that is paranoid schizophrenic. I have personally been present when they've been 5150, more than 2 or 3 times. I have personally seen that person in restraint. I have personally seen that person force-fed medication. I have personally and continue to live with that person's disability. And so this is not something I've read about. This is something I fucking experience every fucking day. So this is not something I'm reading about. So I understand the pain that a lot of people are going through on both sides because I live it. I've experienced it. I've seen it. Trying to figure out how to make a family member to take their medicine, how to get them back into society, how to get them to walk outside of their house. That's not something I read about. That's something I experience. It's not 6 months. It's 35 fucking years.
Please stop using profanity.
Are you serious? He can swear if he wants.
So I asked if we can have 3 additional months to bring all of the key stakeholders to the table to see if anything else could be fleshed out. That was for more than just the people in this room. That's for all the other people who don't have the advocates, that don't have the people that can help them, to see if we could put forth even a better measure. At this point in time, we'll take the vote.
Well, Mr. President, I just want to say something, because I'm not quite sure, and I certainly don't want to speak for Supervisor Riley, and I would never, ever try to speak for you. I'm not quite sure what we're saying is much different than what Wilma and Nate are saying, because they want time to go back to develop the implementation of this Laura's law. We're just expanding it. And we're just
I
thinking
totally
we can
agree.
do better.
I totally agree that they're just asking that it be
I don't
done
know.
today.
I don't know what we're doing. I mean, maybe when it comes back, we don't call it Laura's Law, but maybe it's a better program. We're saying we want to look at this holistically to come up with maybe a better program. And so,
If we can't, we still have what we have before us today.
So as I we go on comment,
we're
just,
actually telling staff to go work on something, and they're hearing each one of the members of this board, and if they don't do what we like, then we're not going to support them when they come back. But no matter what happens, they're going away and they're coming back.
what we found is that a discussion around the implementation of 1421 met such rigid and strong opposition from a stakeholder community we find absolutely essential to all of our programs and services, which are the consumers, that without the direction from the board about whether this was a conversation about how to do it, not if we were going to do it, we couldn't get a collaborative process authentically moving. So that's why we brought the recommendations in the form we brought them to today.
I think you're going to get a collaborative process.
If your direction is in 3 months, bring us alternatives to 1421 that meet the needs of the same population.
Incorporate 1420.
Excuse me?
Incorporate it. Make it better. Come up with other things.
Or respite in the
We're
package.
telling you to be the genius that you are.
We'll take your direction.
Can I ask a question?
No, you cannot. I'm sorry, you cannot. Sorry. So let's take the vote on the motion that's on the floor. And that is to immediately implement AB 1421 as a pilot. That is the motion.
Yeah, just to clarify that as a maker, my understanding is that the actual plan will come back to the board, so.
Absolutely.
But it's to give them direction to proceed with the guidelines for the pilot.
To be clear, the implementation of 1421 is not, you have not voted to implement 1421 until you've made a decision that as a budgetary decision or is a resolution. Those are the only 2 ways to implement 1421. Your direction today to us is work with your consumers on the motion now. Work with your
Well, wait a minute. Is that what is on the floor? Because that's not what I heard.
No.
That's not what I heard.
So
Let's be very clear about what we're voting. Don't confuse us, don't play no sleight of hands on it.
Yep.
Since you're the maker of the motion, what's the motion, Wilma?
Okay, the motion is, well, it's to implement number 10, which it says, through a stakeholder planning and evaluation process, develop a one-year pilot of AB 1421 assisted outpatient treatment that will serve a maximum of 5 adjudicated clients, consumers. The planning process will include defining eligibility criteria for Alameda County and identifying outcomes for the pilot.
That seems to be pretty prescribed.
I'm sorry, my staff was talking to me. If I could just real quick, I really hate the fact the motion is on the floor. And the reason why is because if we can't come up with better, I don't necessarily want to vote against this. Well, I know that. I'm trying not to offend anybody. But I'm trying to say how I feel that I would rather we, and I am going to make a substitute motion, that we implement the spirit of what President Carson was talking about in relationship to going back and seeing if we can, through inclusion of all stakeholders, looking at the programs holistically and seeing if we can come up with something better.
Yes, you may.
You know, I think the board, this is a very consumer-oriented county, so I'd hate to see a split vote. But the reason why I want to go forward, AB 1421 is a law. There are certain provisions to it that can't be changed. I mean, it can be implemented in different ways. I think there can be guidelines. But there are certain very clear things that are said here about what the program is and what the program isn't, including whether you can force drugs, which you can't without a second court order, in terms of who can make the referrals, how the referrals are decided. It calls for, and what it calls for, which includes non-residential, non-locked treatment in the community, et cetera, which we all went through. So on that basis, I would like to proceed with it. I don't want to rediscuss, I mean, very respectful. I mean, I know what everyone on this board has been through, and I know everyone has strong.
No, you don't know what everybody's been through, so
Okay.
don't say that.
All right,
Don't say that, you're not gonna speak for me.
I'm not
Because
speaking.
you haven't been there when they put your
Okay.
family member in restraints. You just said you don't have an immediate family member that's been there. You don't know what it is 365 days a year. That's why I can clearly feel the pain that they are feeling.
We do.
Because I've experienced it myself. So you don't know
We
it.
do too, we do too.
And I resent you saying it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you.
And you have.
Okay, I'm terribly sorry about that. I believe that, anyway, I'd like to, I'd like to take a vote. I mean, if the motion doesn't pass, I don't take these things personally. I mean, I think people have their opinions on these things. I mean, I voted on, in the legislature, I voted on like 6,000 bills when I was there. We didn't take it personally. People have different opinions on these things. And I didn't mean to offend you. I'm very sorry about that. It's not a personal thing with me. But it's something I feel strongly about based on the data on the 5150s.
Yes, you have.
I believe that Supervisor Hagerty, in his motion, did say that you wanted to incorporate the spirit of 1421 and all of the things that Supervisor Chan has said I agree with. I sincerely believe we're going to arrive at the same point in 3 months, and all of the things that are in 1421 will be there in 3 months. The only thing we're going to do is flesh it out and potentially make it even better. So in the spirit of 1421, that's what Supervisor Hagerty, I think, just said, which I seconded as a substitute motion, with the intention that we're going to arrive at a point where we are, all 5 of us are going to agree that this is going to be the program. And I sincerely believe that the people in the audience will help us get there. I sincerely do.
Yeah, we show up at another meeting.
Well, quite honestly, this is the first time I've had this issue heard in public session, correct me if I'm wrong, as a whole body. Now, there have been committee meetings, which I don't sit on, but we do send staff. And I've had meetings with advocates on both sides of the issue, and I appreciate that. But this is the first time it's been publicly aired. And what I'm saying is, and what I believe Supervisor Haggerty is saying, is what's wrong with a little bit more time? What's wrong with a little bit more dialogue? What's wrong with a little bit more discussion if we can all arrive at the same point and agree?
And if we don't, we still have AB 1421 we can vote on.
Yep.
Well, it's clear my motion's gonna fail, even though it has a second, so I'll withdraw it.
So the motion is on the floor. All in favor of the motion that's on the floor? On the substitute motion.
Okay, and just as we move forward, I just want to be a little bit clear. I'm not so heavy 14.1, okay? How you get us there, how we can maybe develop a pilot or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. I don't want you to come back and just do 14.
No, I hear the motion. I would like to repeat it as we understand it. Is that, I don't know if that's procedurally correct?
But yeah, because I think it would be appropriate to repeat it so that we're clear on what the motion is that's on the floor. Now, your motion, Supervisor Chan, your motion had a second.
She withdrew it.
I withdrew it, it's obvious I don't have a third vote.
Okay. Okay, so both the motion maker and the second have withdrawn.
So we're good.
We just wanted you to restate the motion for clarity.
It's not on tape.
Your motion, because I understood your
It was
motion.
pretty clear, but I mean, you know, it's
We can go back to the tape.
never going to be same twice, but it was pretty clear on the tape, I'm sure. I would just say that I'd like to send this back for 3 months to get with the stakeholders from all groups to look at the current system that we have, what's working, what's not, how we incorporate things to come up with a holistic system, and also how, I mean, I don't even want to say this next part because I didn't really say it last time, but on the 1421 issue, I just want to make sure that as we work with the stakeholders group, that we come up with something more compassionate, and that's what I said. But I think my original motion was better, so let me be clear. Thanks for making me retreat.
We'll get it from the tape.
And I just, to be clear, we understand your motion to formally convene all stakeholders over a 90-day period to look at all alternatives to providing services to the target population identified under AB 1421, focusing on alternatives to AB 1421 that are more compassionate.
Well, I think Supervisor Bralieri also talked about respite, he talked about other things too, as he seconded the motion, so I think,
We'll go to the table.
right.
As long as the people who have to vote are clear on the motion.
So who oversees the process based on your motion?
Who's going to receive?
Who oversees this 3-month process? Is it facilitated by behavioral care or is it facilitated by an independent with behavioral care at the table fully participate?
I think behavioral health care would be the same people that are sitting here we're looking at.
Our recommendation would be to use an outside facilitator, which we'd already put into all of our narrative, for a couple of reasons. One, somebody objective that is very good at moving forward public processes such as this. And the second is so that Dr. Chapman and I, and probably a couple of other members of our executive team could also be participants
That's
and
fine.
not lead it. So that would be our intention. We've identified the county partners that would be necessary for any discussion, as well as consumers and family members, and we would like some of the providers from the community to also participate.
Okay, I think, is everybody clear on the motion? All in favor say aye. One no and one abstention, 3 ayes. Okay. Do we have anything else on the board agenda?
There's public input.
Public input?